How close to total anarchy is South Africa right now? With Eskom literally at the point of collapse, I doubt that there are many people who realize just how close this country is to total and absolute chaos and anarchy. This morning, you might have woken up to a hot shower and a hot breakfast. The traffic lights are working normally, the traffic is heavy, and everyone is going about their business as usual. Everything seems so normal. I'd like to use this video to demonstrate to you just how quickly your world could be turned upside down, how quickly the comfort of your own home could turn into a prison where you are literally waiting to die. We have all seen what a few farm murderers are capable of. What do you think a mob of hundreds or even thousands of rioting blacks are capable of? Eskom has said that they are in a race against time to prevent a total collapse of the grid. Let me tell you, they are not in the business of telling it like it is. If they are saying that they are close to a total collapse already, you can expect the grid to collapse at any time. Could be today, could be tomorrow, could be next week. I know that they have declared that there will be no load shedding this week, but I suspect that they have received a shipment of diesel fuel to power their diesel turbines for a while. We will be back to load shedding pretty soon. Remember that over a weekend, the electricity demand drops considerably due to businesses and a lot of small industry closing for the weekend. Also remember that it is still pretty warm out, but winter is just around the corner. There is no way that Eskom is going to be able to keep up with the demand in winter if they can't even keep up now. I would like to go through a scenario with you, a scenario of what I think would be quite possible all across the country should the Eskom grid collapse and the country is plummeted into darkness. After the power goes out, of course, the obvious things will be noticed immediately. The lights just don't come on at all anymore. The fridge starts to warm up and the freezer starts to defrost. The geyser doesn't make hot water anymore. No problem, you say. Get the gas bra out. So the first night goes pretty well. You eat a hot meal and you have a relatively warm shower, depending on how long back the power failed, of course. Unfortunately, you will have to forego your episode of Seven Alarm tonight, unless you have a generator or are equipped with a solar panel system. You go to bed hoping that the power will be back the next morning. Day 2. The freezer is now definitely starting to thaw out and water is starting to run out of the bottom of it. Towels are placed around it to stop the water from flooding the kitchen. You might or might not have a generator, which if you did, would by now be purring away, keeping the essential things like the fridge and freezer cold. Lucky you. For those who don't have a generator, life starts to get tough a little earlier. For those without generators, they start to eat very well because the freezer is thawing and they decide that they would rather eat the food than throw it away in a day or two. For those with generators, that night they have a hot shower, but those without a generator are not so lucky. Their water is ice cold. Reports and rumors now start to do the rounds amongst the neighbors of the masses raiding shopping centers, corner cafes, and in some cases even private homes. You might start to hear gunshots in the distance that night. You start to get a little worried because you have noticed that your fuel supply for the generator is starting to run a little low, but you are still confident that there will be power before you run out of fuel totally. Day 3 starts out with cold water for those without generators. But you notice that the water pressure is looking rather low and the water is starting to look a little discolored. You decide to fill up any spare containers you can find with water, just in case. You see, when the power goes out, the water purification works are not able to clean any water and are not able to pump any water up to the water reservoirs and towers. The water supply just simply dries up. That's in your taps anyway. The fridge is now as warm inside as it is outside, and you decide to unpack things from it that look like they are starting to go bad. Most of the freezer contents are now thawed, but still fairly cold. You will still eat fresh meat tonight. By late afternoon, the water coming out of the tap is just a trickle and is very dirty. By nightfall, there is no water at all. Dinner goes well on the gas, and there is still enough water in storage to cook. Unfortunately, you do not have enough water to wash yourself in anymore. There are now more reports doing the rounds of rioting, looting, and chaos spreading to other areas. By now you realize that when you try to set your alarm system for the night, the battery is flat and it is now impossible to set the alarm. The electric fence has also stopped working and your motorized driver gate is getting very slow. Cell phones have gone flat And unless you have a car charger that can charge your phone, you now are shut off from the rest of the world. You might find that even if you are able to charge your phone, the cell phone towers are dead due to their generators also having run out of fuel or their generators have been stolen. Things start to look a little more serious now. You settle down for the night to the sounds of sirens and the occasional gunshots in the distance. Day 4 dawns. Things are starting to get a little rough. The freezer contents are now well and truly thawed out and starting to get warm. Things like chicken and fish already have to be thrown away. You are at least able to eat the contents of the freezer that you cook on the gas you have. Last night you heard a lot of gunfire, not too far away, as well as sirens. At least the police still have fuel. Today there are police vehicles driving around telling people that a state of emergency has been declared and that you are to stay indoors, for your own safety, of course. Your water is running low and you have not washed in more than 24 hours. Your children, if you have any, are starting to get restless. They are wanting food and drinks that you are not able to give them. You've not been able to flush the toilets since the day before, and they are starting to stink. There is still enough semi-cold food that you can cook on the gas, and you give yourself and your family a wipe down with a small amount of water. You lock yourself and your family in one bedroom and go to bed to the sound of sirens, gunfire, and the occasional shouts of the marauding masses who are by now starting to run riot at night, looting anything they can lay their hands on. At some point in the middle of the night, you are awoken by the sound of gunfire very close by and lots of screaming. You sneak a peek out of your bedroom window to see there are fires burning in the street and there is a lot of movement. The screams you can hear are coming from your neighbors down the road who have been dragged out of their house, kicked and beaten while the masses ransack their house for food and anything they can find of value. There are so many in the streets that it would be foolish for anybody to go out in defense of the neighbors, who are by now lying in the street, bleeding profusely and barely moving. You watch in horror as they are beaten and chopped to death. What you see terrifies you, but you keep watching. You have to see where these crowds are going next. 2 more houses are looted in this way before the sky starts to lighten and the crowds of marauding savages start to retreat. The screams of your neighbors are now quiet and their lifeless bodies lie covered in blood where they fell. There are fires burning in the street still, and you realize that it is the contents of their houses that was dragged outside and thrown on top of the burning tires that is still burning. The air is filled with putrid smoke and an eerie silence. Suddenly you are overwhelmed with absolute terror at the realization that by nightfall, these crowds will probably be back and you and your family will probably be next. You decide to pack your car with whatever you can fit into it in the way of non-perishable food, clothing, and other necessities, just leaving enough space for you and your family to sit. You hurriedly lock the house, get into your car, and leave. Once on the road, you realize that you have no idea where to go. You decide to head for a friend's house, but halfway there you see that the road has been blocked and burning tires and rocks have been dragged into the road, blocking it totally for vehicles. You are going nowhere. The only thing left to do is to turn around and head back home. You get there, put the car back in the garage and unpack it. It is starting to get late, so you decide to make something to eat before it gets dark. After that, you make preparations to barricade yourself in your house with anything and everything you can find. You don't have any firearms to protect yourself with, so you make do with a knife out of the kitchen and a spade from the garage as a last resort. You retreat to your bedroom with your family before dark, lock the door, and prepare for a sleepless night. You position a chair at the edge of the window so that you can keep an eye on the street. As the sun sets, you can hear gunfire in the distance. Slowly the gunfire gets louder as it gets closer, and eventually, under the cover of darkness, the masses start their raids once again. You find yourself nodding off while peering through the slit in the curtains. Will they come for me and my family tonight is the only thought on your mind as the putrid smell of burning tires fills the air. You notice movement at the end of the road. You hear glass breaking followed by shouting accompanied by the flashes and noises of gunfire. The street is filled with people running in all directions under the light of burning tires. You know it's only a matter of time. If you can imagine this in your mind's eye, you can appreciate just how terrifying this experience could be. The pure terror of watching your neighbors being dragged out of their houses one by one and beaten to death, knowing that your turn is coming, must be one of the worst experiences imaginable, especially if you have small children. Here I have just given you a perfectly plausible and likely situation that developed into a life or death situation in as little as 4 days. I bet it would take less than that to degrade into total chaos should Eskom shut down suddenly. Once that power goes out for good, total chaos and anarchy will prevail. The police will be powerless to control the situation. We all know that if the Eskom grid collapses totally, it would take anything from weeks to months to start it back up again. In that time, this country will be turned into a battleground of epic proportions and is going to leave thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people dead. Could the current situation with Eskom be the start of it all? Nobody really knows for sure, but if you look at the sequence of events so far and plot a path forward, there is little chance that we will not have a total shutdown of Eskom, or rather of the Eskom grid. We need to prepare ourselves in every way we can. The old saying of having the 3 Gs comes to mind. They would be gold, or something of value to trade with, guns, and grub. If you have these 3, you have the basis of what it will take to survive the chaos that will follow a total shutdown at Eskom. So I ask again, how close to total anarchy do you think South Africa is right now? Something to think about. Please remember to like this video, share it on other social media platforms, and if you have not done so yet, subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to receive notifications of my future uploads. If you would like to support me in my efforts to keep the lights burning, food on the table, as well as to prepare for what I consider to be inevitable here, I have provided a number of ways for international as well as local subscribers to contribute. Please check the description of this video for details. To those who have already made a contribution, I say thank you. You have no idea how much it is appreciated. Putting together an emergency supply of food, medical supplies, as well as survival gear for life away from home is not cheap at all, and your contribution could quite possibly mean the difference between life and death. Until next time. If you are in favor of separating yourself from the madness in this country, take a look at the new Zuidland movement by USAF, the United South African Federation. They are forming a new independent nation that will separate you from the South African population as a citizen of Zuidland. A nation without a territory, for now. A nation that will have its own set of laws, its own government, and its own financial system that will stop us from feeding the beast that is trying to eat us. Check the description for the USAF website. Register right now if you haven't already.